Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast I do here on the channel called Your Favorite X-Men, where we take a look at somebody's favorite X-Men character, talk about why that character means so much to them, and just have a general chat about the character and maybe a few of their stories. If you'd like to support this project or any of the other comic analysis or overview projects I do here on the channel, the best way you can do that is to subscribe. With that being said, today I'm joined by Daniel Mcnea, who is a really fantastic artist. I will link their Twitter in the description of this video if you'd like to check him out. But thank you so much for coming on to talk X-Men today, Daniel.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
And now, would you like to do us the honor, the pleasure of introducing to us who your favorite X-Men character is?
My favorite X-Men character is Dazzler.
I love Dazzler so much. She's the disco queen, the finger gun shooter. She's always fitted. She was introduced in Uncanny X-Men number 130. And I would love to hear from you why Dazzler is your favorite X-Men and what specifically about her resonates with you. And I'll be excited to compare that with my own perspective on the character because I love so many X-Men, but she's definitely up there on my favorite list, and she resonates with me for specific reasons, and I'd be interested to see if there's any overlap.
I have to say, the first draw was the visual because I discovered her when I was a kid. And it was just, who's this shiny, sparkly lady? And ooh, she's a singer. And ooh, she's on roller skates? What is happening? I didn't understand it, but I like looking at it. But I was still so young. I wasn't really, paying attention to the character. It wasn't really until her Outback days when I was old enough to start absorbing what I was reading. And she was a fave then, but I wasn't completely connected. It wasn't until I was a teenager when I moved to a school where I was finally around other comic geeks. And we went to a comic shop and they had every issue of Dazzler Solo. And so I bought them all. And that's what did it. That cemented it. I'm like, I already kind of liked her. I already dug the vibe, but it was when I read the Solo, I was like, oh, wow. Even though comparatively it was funny too, because I read her in Outback and then went back to the Solo and then went, through the Outback again. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't think I like the Outback as much as I used to.
Well, her Solo series, it's one that I got introduced to just this year, and I didn't know it even existed before that, because whenever I go comic book hunting, I can normally find, an array of X-Men comics, but I just had never seen the Dazzler Solo series anywhere. Until recently, I did find some issues at a convention, and I went and I just had to pick those up because, one, the artwork. You're so right about Dazzler being a character that immediately draws you in because, of the spectacle she's got going on.
Right.
The character design is just so fun and very comic booky. It's fantastic. But the covers on those books really pop too and are so great that I just had to grab a few of them from that run. But that series itself is such an interesting little corner of the X-Men Marvel world because, I don't know, when I was reading it almost gives off a vibe of absurdism, like wonderful absurdism.
Right.
Just because it's just Dazzler and, she wants to be a singer. That's her goal. It's at the point, I believe, where she helped the X-Men out already and has now left them to do her own thing and follow her own path and establish her music career. But then she keeps getting sucked into these moments where she needs to display heroism. But not only that, she's going against huge threats like Galactus and Nightmare, and I think Hela is one of the first ones. It's insane.
Enchantress.
Oh, Enchantress, yes.
And then Doom.
Yeah, and that's right. She has like a disco battle with Enchantress or something, right? Just crazy.
A sing-off, yeah. Enchantress wants to prove she's the better singer, but alas. And then they meet up again and have another challenge because Enchantress is petty like that. But yeah, it was, and it's funny because I think it just feels more absurd in, today's lens too. Whereas in the early 80s, it was kind of like, well, yeah, it's ridiculous. It's the 80s. But one of the many things I've always loved about her is the fact that, for being a flashy pop star, superpowered, mutant with very visually impressive powers, she's very down to earth. And I think that's one of the things that I always struggled with Solo Dazzler versus Outback Dazzler, because Claremont kind of needed somebody to be the quote girly girl, and he already has his Claremazons. So he needed her to be the little more materialistic, a little more, ew, I don't want to do that. Ew, I don't like that, kind of thing, when I'm like, well, that's not really the girl she was in her Solo, but okay. But yeah, she's I've always seen her as very down to earth, very relatable. She's, what the most appealing qualities to her is that she's a very kind person. But something that, I don't know, it's kind of weird that it struck me at like 12 or 13. But one thing I've always been fascinated by, and I thought this was just in my head, but Jim Shooter and I believe Louise Simonson talked about in an interview back in the 80s about her, is that, she's one of the kindest, most caring characters you'll meet in the Marvel Universe, but she has a hell of a temper. And I don't know, I loved that, because you didn't really see that a lot with like, oh no, because characters, especially back in the day, were either they were good and true, or they were dark and gritty. There was not a lot of, you didn't see a lot of that mixture.
Yeah, exactly. And something about Dazzler that I love, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, is that she's got her music interest that she wants to follow, but she really often has to put that aside for the moment or temporarily sacrifice it to help out humanity or her community of friends or her allies.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that okay, all of the major X-Men are brave and noble and courageous because those are kind of just inherent traits of being an X-Men, but her doing it struck me as maybe even more noble because, at least with the other characters, we don't get much insight into their, I guess, life goals outside of the X-Men, and that may just be because the X-Men for them is an all-consuming thing, but for Dazzler, it's not like that.
Right.
So she's kind of doing a double sacrifice by putting her life on the line and exposing herself as a mutant in a world that hates her, but she's also giving up some of the efforts that she could be placing into her music career too.
Right. And that's another huge appeal to the character, because it does feel like, and you're right, they're all consuming, but with the X-Men, it is kind of like most of them feel like, well, this is our gig. This is what we do. We don't, you want to see them have outside interests, but they also seem pretty okay with being X-Men. And then you have this character who she's like, well, I don't wanna. But I am a good person. I am, if someone's in need, I'm going to help them. I'm going to step in whether it's, a random person on the street or one of the X-Men, she's going to step up. She always steps up. That's one of her best qualities, even when she doesn't really want to. Doing the right thing is in her wheelhouse, but, the cost that it takes from her entertainment pursuits it's a thing I appreciate, but it's also a thing I'm kind of tired of hearing. There's like, between a lot of longtime Dazzler fans, it's become a running joke of I'm a singer, not a superhero. Like, I don't ever want to hear her say that again. Because it's sort of like, well, you've been doing this long enough where I think we can stop saying that. Just be both. You're both. Just accept it. You're going to sing sometimes. You're going to have to save another universe other times.
I also think she's like kind of an interesting character to kind of explore the like aspect of being an artist that kind of intertwines itself with like social justice and like how you can use your art to make positive change in the world. But with that being said, I'm kind of curious. I think you are a little up to date on the current Krakoa era of X-Men, right? Because I've seen some of your artwork reflect as such.
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, because something that kind of I found a little disappointing in regards to the character about this era was that she was mostly reduced to a background character, just sort of singing in the background like all the time. Like that's the only kind of glimpses we would get of Dazzler. So I'm curious what you think would be kind of an interesting path to explore with Dazzler during this, such a radical era of mutantdom. I know we're getting the Exterminators book by Leah Williams with her soon. I'm really excited for that.
Right.
And hopefully it'll sort of, since it's a limited series, it'll set a foundation for her to move forward with something else in the future. But I'm just kind of curious where you'd like to see the character go in the coming years.
Boy, just, being utilized would be great.
Yeah, that's a great starting point.
I don't feel like I ask for much. Just having her, the whole, her being, she's, since the Utopia area when she was kind of, quote, brought back full time, she's been the cameo queen. I mean, she's got her own hashtag.
I think we even got baited recently with one of the Devil's Reign X-Men covers, didn't we?
Yep.
Like she was,
yep.
Yeah, she was on it, but not
she
in
was
the issue.
The only one not on in the issue. Yep, that was great.
Oh,
that's a good time. I always love that. What puzzles me is that why she isn't being, it's not just a matter of, well, I want to see my fave. Well, of course I do. But, it can be tricky when your fave is Dazzler and it's not Storm or Wolverine or, people who have been used regularly for decades. So, when you have a character who disappears for long periods of time, and then when she comes back as either a quick blink and you miss her cameo or kind of as a little bit of a joke that gets frustrating. And in this new era, I was very excited for it going in, but I kind of realized quickly that, she's 100% fitting of Jonathan Hickman's definition of an Omega mutant, but they're still not considering her one.
Yeah, I want to talk about her powers actually a little bit, because I'm always kind of unsure how to describe them. So basically what I normally say is that she can turn sound into light and also make lasers and then make people dizzy with them, but that almost it doesn't give the full scope of how powerful she can be. Right. So I don't know, how would you kind of describe that like Omega level status for her? Like how do you qualify that?
Well, and it's because we've had those even before I think we designated Omega level. Geeks have always been like, oh, this one's the most this and this one's the most that. They can do this, and I never needed that for her. I just needed people to stop thinking she just made bright flashes. That was really frustrating.
For a while, it seemed like she, at least before the Outback era, from what I've read, she kind of like utilized the more dizzy aspects of her powers, or like more hypnotizing aspects of her powers, rather than like the more forceful uses of her powers.
Well, there was also I think, in many ways, a disconnect between the art and the text. And because, there's some incredible shots of her, visual power manifestation. And you think, this looks like something that will destroy a building, that will incinerate everything in its path. And then you just have somebody, go, oh, my eyes. And you're like, oh, okay, wait, what? Or you'll have other characters that she's fighting talk about her vast powers. And, Enchantress is real big for declaring that. Then, it's being said that she's like blinding people, dizzying people, shattering their senses. But then the description will be, how she manifests a power like none ever seen, how she can it was very contradictory. It was very odd to try and correlate. So I understand why some people think like, oh, well, she was just blinding and dazzling, quote, people back then.
Yeah, and there are moments, like I was recently reading Fall of the Mutants, which she is in, and I actually really enjoyed her little arc in there with, sort of setting things aside with Rogue and moving on from when Rogue tried to kill her, but that's it's another thing. But there was a moment where they're fighting Freedom Force, and Dazzler's like, some of you cover your eyes because, I'm gonna do this big disorienting flash.
Right.
And I just found it interesting. I was like, I don't know, like the fact that the way to beat it is just to cover your eyes. Like I was like, Dazzler, I feel like you have more in your arsenal than that.
Yeah, it almost felt like after a while, if I'm sure she's fun to draw. That's another reason I don't understand why she's not utilized more. Her powers are just, they should always pop on the page, and I would think that would be a fun challenge for artists. But yeah, going back to her power usage, like with the Hickman definition, it's just the not having any upper limit to your main power source. And her main power source is transduction. It's absorbing the sound and transducing it. There's no limit. It's been said on page. She's been studied, and it says there is no limit. So I'm like, that 1000% qualifies for your definition. So either you don't care or you didn't research.
I think that can be an issue sometimes with, not that I feel like Dazzler isn't like C-list. I feel like she is fairly, in some of my favorite X-Men stories that I've read during like the Claremont era, she's there for a while.
Yeah.
But with certain characters that are more kind of C-list, like for example, it's like you said earlier, when you have a favorite who isn't utilized that much, then they end up being utilized for like brief little cameos. It can leave you wanting or a little disappointed. For example, one of my favorite mutants that I can't even really pinpoint exactly why she resonates with me, because she really is not in that much, but Cat's Eye from the Hellions, and she is I almost never see her. I think I've seen her in the like original New Mutants run, and then after that she popped up once, I think in issue 1 of the Zeb Wells Hellion series.
Yes.
And Cat's Eye has like a very specific way that she speaks, and she's a very specific color and everything, and like that wasn't paid attention to very much, and so like I got my taste of Cat's Eye, but it was disappointing, and it sort of sounds like that's like what your situation with Dazzler is.
Yeah, that's what makes it worse, when you get crumbs, and even the crumbs aren't tasty. It's funny, and I fully take responsibility for my absurdity about it. But when her hair is yellow, I get pissed. I just do. And I know a lot of it is because I have actually had conversations with professional artists working for Marvel who have drawn and colored her, that they did not know her hair was strawberry blonde. They legitimately said, oh my God, I did not know that. I thought she was just a blonde. And I know it's a minor, and I try to hold back because it can sound so petty. But to me, it's important because it's, first of all, there are many number of blondes. And, during the whole Mystique situation where she took over, when Dazzler was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, it was like there was Emma, there was Magic, there was Warren, there was the Cuckoo. So I think they had started dyeing their hair then. But one of them was still blonde. But it was just like, you guys, you have a whole plethora of reference for the fact that orange was a color. Her hair was orange. Why is this difficult? And I just think that why something like that is so important is it also helps to set her apart. And when people try to dismiss it as, oh, she's just quote blonde pop star, or I've also talked to creators who've been like, well, she is a pop star, so she should be able to change her hair. Well, sure, let her do whatever she wants, whatever you feel you need to write for her. However, don't make an excuse when, recognizability and branding is a huge thing in comics. Like, we're never going to dye Storm's hair brown. We're not going to turn Lorna's hair blonde. You know what I mean? Jean's not going to be a brunette.
Or if something like that were to happen, it would usually be something that's part of the narrative. Like when Dazzler's hair was black for a bit. It might have been a wig. I think it was when she was with Lila.
Yeah, that was a wig.
Okay, yes, it was a wig. But I actually love that you brought up the hair thing, because I remember seeing discourse between you and someone about it on Twitter. I think they were just asking questions about the hair. And
yeah, because they legitimately didn't know. They were curious why orange in her hair? Well, because that's her hair.
You were actually you were writing things. You were taking it into your own hands and saying, no, Dazzler's not. People were saying blonde. She's not blonde. She's her hair is this color. It's got more of an orange to it,
right?
Which I love to see. The characters mean like so much to us, and there will be these tiny things that people sometimes latch on to as like wanting to be imminently part of the character. And I just love that the hair discourse was something. And it's like you said, I mean, it is marketability of the character, and with all the other blonde ladies in Marvel, that distinction is kind of nice. I remember when the X of Swords story was coming out, people kept getting confused between Emma and Saturnine. Who I think can look similar to. This is another conversation. I think they can look similar to some degree, but there are very distinct like outfit choices that Saturnine makes that I don't think Emma would.
Right.
But anyway, it brings me to one of the immediate things I had the urge to ask you, because I feel like you probably, and you've already shown that you might have some interesting insight on this, but for someone who does art and character design work and whatnot, do you have a favorite Dazzler look? Because she's had a few over the years, but is there a particular one or a few that you're more fond of?
I'm OG. I love the disco. I'm very defensive of the disco, and not in a way that's, oh, she has to always look like that. And a lot of people get confused when, I try to be pro disco when I put it out there. It's about not dismissing where she came from. And it's funny to talk about, because it's like a lot of creators will, they try to stray her away, and they'll revamp her image, and, they'll take her punk or take her this. And I hold my cringe. I'm not someone who's going to bother a creative person over this, but it's also, to me, it feels dismissive, because here's the thing about the disco image and why I like it so much. Out of every look she's ever had, it's the most endurable. It's the most enduring image. It's the one that, we want to keep changing our image, but anytime we need a promo, we're going to trot out the disco.
Well, it's like you said, I think a part of it is just the marketability of Dazzler. I mean, when I think of Dazzler, that might not be my favorite outfit. I do love it a lot. My favorite, though, is I think the Outback era, just because something about like that blue suit with the little Dazzler logo and the headband is really fun for me.
And that's an outfit. It's funny because whenever I draw her with short hair, which is rare, but when I do, I always get the short hair Outback fans out who have to tell me how much they prefer her with short hair. But it's always because, they grew up with that. Well, so did I, but It doesn't mean I have to be tied to it. It's, you like that, that's great, but I like what I like. And I think going back to the disco look, it's, when I say it's the most enduring, it's not just because it's, you automatically know who it is, but also it's the most easily adaptable. And that's always what's confused me, because all you have to do is think of every major female pop star in the last 40 years. They have all had some level of disco inspiration. They have all had, Madonna, Kylie, Gaga, Beyonce. I mean, they've all touched on it, whether it's, a huge part of their image or not. And so it's what kind of makes me laugh, where I'm like, you guys, you don't seem to get it. It doesn't mean you have to keep her in bell bottoms and roller skates. It just means you can work off of this more than you realize. I don't know. It's just, I think when they take her, like, when they put her in the punk phase for a minute, or goth or whatever that was, it was very like dismissive of who Dazzler is.
I have to say the punk Dazzler doesn't quite for me, but if it does for anyone out there, more power to you. Personally, one of the more fun Dazzler looks that I like also, and this is not one that, was around for any period of longevity, but it's during that Dazzler series, and I think it was just because she was doing some country work or something, but there's like 2 or 3 issues where she's rocked out in the Disco Dazzler outfit, but also with just a white cowboy hat. And it looks so good, though. It really works.
Yeah.
You made me think of this question just now because you mentioned all of those pop stars, and I'm not really big into music myself, which a lot of people find odd when I say, but generally I just listen to podcasts and news and movie trailers, actually. So I want to know if your music taste or interest in music was part of what resonated in Dazzler. Is that the case at all?
Oh, definitely. That was like when I really fully absorbed who she was as a character. And then I realized, all the things I felt like I had in common with her, and just like her view, her determination, her like, I may not want to do it, but I'm going to end up doing it because it's the right thing to do. I hope a little bit of that. But the music was a huge, because I'm not going to lie. My lifelong dream as a little one was to be a female pop star. So there's definitely a lot of that. And that's why, like, sometimes I still make playlists, and I don't do the Dazzler inspired. I do know if she were making music, this would be her album.
Okay, that's very cool. That's very cool, actually. I'm curious about what some of those are, and I don't know if you've shared those on Twitter or whatnot before, or if those are out there for any public.
Yeah, I have Spotify playlists. I'll send you the links.
Great, yeah, because I definitely want to listen. And as someone who is probably unfamiliar with a lot of the artists on there, I'm kind of curious what your take on like what Dazzler Style is. Especially since, like, I don't know, I guess part of the reason that the character's outfit goes through some changes sometimes is because artists or writers are trying to shift her with the culture. But I don't know, have they, like, canonically mentioned what type of music Dazzler does produce? I mean, is it just disco?
Well, and that's the funny thing, because when you go back and read her solo, she sings more rock and country and soul even, and disco is not, she's singing in discos. She's singing at the discotheque, and she's got the sparkly look, but she sings all kinds of music. And that was another thing that appealed to me too. And that was a huge thing, is growing up in a lot of smaller towns like I did, and when all your friends love Superman and Wolverine, and you're like, my favorite's Dazzler. It doesn't always go over well, but I would always defend, because the first thing that they would attack was disco, because it's gay. Disco's gay. So those did not mesh well in the 80s and 90s. And I would always defend, and I would even pull out comics and say, look, she's singing Pink Floyd. Look, she's singing Ike and Tina Turner. She's,
You brought the receipts.
Yes, I had literal receipts. So yeah, I would still think, today I think of her as primarily a dance pop type electro kind of thing, but a woman who would definitely branch out into other, she would do some rock stuff. I know there's one comic that that said she made a rap album, but we're not gonna
Dazzler rap album.
Yeah, we're not gonna acknowledge that one.
Are you aware, like, has Marvel ever released anything that they've been like, this is Dazzler singing? Because I know, if we're looking way back at the inception of Dazzler, she, I think, had the potential to be like the first Marvel movie, with their pairing with like Casablanca Records and everything.
Yes.
But that never came to fruition. Obviously, then Marvel was left with the character, then gave it to Tom DeFalco, put her in that X-Men issue, and so on and so forth, and we got Dazzler, Allison Blair, thank God.
Yeah.
But other than that, have we seen any inception of her? Like,
no. And it's wild because in the 90s, did you ever hear of the character called Nightcat?
No, I don't think so.
Oh yeah, she was supposed to be a new superhero big thing. She was a rock chick in black leather, and there was going to be a cross promotion that went nowhere. And then with in the last few years, Luna Snow, the character, she has ice powers, but she's a K-pop star, and they actually had music made.
Oh, but none for Dazzler?
Yeah, so that made me a little salty. I'm like, you have a character, Dazzler's just sitting over here like, really? That's cute. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, at least release the Dazzler rap album.
Oh, God. Shush. But it does seem like, and that's one of the many reasons it puzzles me that she's not utilized more. I mean, like, just for that alone, the cross promotion of I would always prefer an actress over a singer to play her, but whatever they do. The cross promotion of this, especially for younger fans, look, it's a Dazzler song. This is how they haven't thought to capitalize on that. I mean, I'm sure they have. Let me correct myself. I'm sure they've thought, but the fact that they're not doing anything with it, and she's a character with not just the cross promotion potential, but the character potential. The fact that she's just still kind of wallowing when she should be an A-lister. She has all the ingredients.
And it's kind of interesting that she hasn't received that love too, because, so that original Dazzler series, I don't have exact analytics on how the comic sold, but I know it was part of maybe an experiment where they specifically put it only in comic book shops.
Right.
And I know the first issue did like incredibly well when it came to sales. Like I said, I don't have exact figures, but just knowing that the series,
I think it was like, I think it was 400,000.
Okay, yeah, because I remember doing something saying that it did like exceptionally well, especially for Dazzler, who didn't really have like name recognition at the time. But then that series also went on for I think around 50 issues, right?
Yeah, 42.
Okay, yeah, so it must have been selling fairly well too. Then I guess I don't know what happened. I guess they absorb her into Claremont's series at the end of that run.
Well, yeah, she was selling really well for a while, and then at some point it just kind of dropped off, and I think they went bi-monthly, and then when she ended, she was supposed to join the revamped X Factor.
Oh, okay, interesting. That would have been really interesting, actually.
Yes, that was the original plan, and that's one of the other examples through history that so many times Dazzler was supposed to be in comic A, B, C, but it didn't work out because of reason 1, 2, 3.
So Dazzler has been historically on the precipice of becoming an A-lister, but someone keeps pushing her back. There must be someone in the editorial sense that hates Dazzler, and I think we need to find out who that is.
I'm going to call him out. I'm going to call him out because he resigned, but Joe Quesada, yeah, he made it very well known in the 90s that he hated disco, and there was no reason to have Dazzler in things, which greatly would explain why, she disappeared for most of the 90s. But, I've heard stories, but we've even had I've saved Twitter. I've saved tweets from writers who said, well, yeah, I wanted to put her in this, but I couldn't.
Oh, wow. So I was kind of joking when I said that, but it turns out there's some truth behind it.
Oh, yeah, no, there is absolute truth. Yeah, that's part of, the frustration of when you find that out. It's almost like I don't want to know that because, well, what else is going on? But also it doesn't make sense. You can't dismiss a character because you don't like the thing when you guys have the power to change the thing you don't like.
And that's weird too, because obviously, yes, disco is a part of the inception of the character, but Allison is so much more than just disco. Yes. She's really interesting aside from that.
And that's what always that's what, when the deep fan stuff comes in, that's what hurts your heart when people just so callously dismiss, the disco chick, or you see lists of, her and poor Jubilee, they make sparkles. Well, then you clearly don't read comics.
And like for me personally, and this is kind of circling back to the beginning, we got kind of far away from this as I normally do on here. But I was going to say one of the reasons that Dazzler always resonated with me too was because for like most of my life, and still I'm still connected to it, I was like a theater kid, growing up. I did theater all the time, always was doing performance. I do playwriting now, which is more or less performative and more just in my office writing like a little recluse. But it was nice to see like some artistic representation in the mutant teams as well. I was like, oh, that's really cool. That's like an angle we don't get too often in comic books. I think maybe like the one other, star that I can think of is maybe like Wonder Man when he was on the West Coast Avengers. But aside from that, like we didn't get much of that. And so I was really excited to have Dazzler. Now, I mean, she wasn't like an actor or like a theater performer, but just the fact that she was doing like something in performance and she cared about her art was appealing to me. And she had passion.
She wasn't just I think it was also the time too where, it was like, in order to be an artist, you better be passionate. Whereas now it's like, I could do that on the weekend in between hawking my skincare and in between, whereas back then it was like, well, nobody would care if you weren't so passionate for it. And it's, one of the qualities I loved about her was that's one of the things they got right even back in the day was conveying her passion for her art and how it wasn't just about being famous. It was she loves to sing and how it makes her feel when she sings for people. And that was always fascinating to me. But it was just like you mentioned Wonder Man, and then Lila Cheney, who she got even less than Daz most of the time, but they kind of locked her in with her power.
Yeah, I think really the most I ever saw them lean into her celebrity status was kind of after she walked through the Siege Perilous, and there was the movie thing, and then there was also her encounter with, her obsessive, crazy fan, which I don't even really remember how that wrapped up.
That was, going back to her powers, which is another thing, I would love to utilize or see utilized, is the mind-altering aspect. Because he was, trying to kill her, and she managed to use the light to calm him instead of, just incinerating him like she could have. Then she came back with her memory scrambled when, the X-Men relaunched 90. Her and Longshot got reunited and she went to Mojo, and that was the last we saw of her, besides a couple guest spots for the whole time.
I did want to ask you about your thoughts on the relationship between Dazzler and Longshot, actually, or just any of her relationships in continuity, kind of just what you think of those.
I'm not a big relationshipper. Just especially for female characters, because I don't ever want it to become, well, that's how they're defined. And so that's why, I'm all for a good hot tryst. I'm all for a deep, connection as long as the woman isn't defined by that. And the setup for it was just, it was, when Claremont decided to write her it's funny is even though she was older than Rogue, he tended to write her acting younger. Like Dazzler would throw the hissy fits and get super jealous over everything Longshot did, and it was just so bizarre to me. So that's why I could never really get on board with the coupling, because it felt forced.
Yeah, I think the most it did for me was just kind of make Longshot a little more interesting, which is not a good thing for Dazzler, really. Because for the most part, Longshot, I don't really feel a particular way about him. He was just kind of there for most of the run.
He was definitely the low man on the pole for me in that group. And it was really just a lot of, well, I only care about you when you're with her. And, he could be a fine character on his own, but I've not seen much evidence to that. And to know, not to say anything negative to the fans out there, and I know he has them. He's fine. I don't like the coupling. I would rather see him do things on his own. And whenever they have been reunited, it was mostly Claremont, and he didn't remember her now. I'm like, okay, we went through the amnesia already with them. Now we're doing this again where he doesn't remember her at all. And then she almost kills herself because he doesn't remember her.
Oof.
And yeah, that was in the new Excalibur era. And that awful. And it just became, and what's funny is it became where she's just so insecure. She needs a man where she was this woman who was like, well, yeah, I'm going to date Paul tonight. And then I got a date with Ken next week. And
that really is what it was like in that Dazzler series. And yeah, you're right. That was kind of more fun.
Yeah. There's a lot of cringe writing in it still, but there's so much of it. It's like, wow, that was way ahead.
I think I did because I got the Marvel Masterworks of those Dazzler, that Dazzler series a while back. And I think when I was doing an overview of them, I was saying that I enjoy the writing for the most part, this specifically Tom DeFalco's part. I enjoy the writing for the most part there, but man, does Tom DeFalco love his alliteration. Like I like alliteration too, but the man kept going nuts with the alliteration.
Yeah.
It was like almost every sentence somebody was saying, there was just alliteration over and over again. And I was like, it's clever, but it might throw off like just the rhetorical style of the book a little bit.
It was, I think you have to really, and it's hard to do, especially for, when you try to get someone who's, 19 into Dazzler now. It's like they don't have the headspace of, well, yeah, this was all kind of absurd back then. There was a way of writing that was just a little what? Even the brilliant stuff, there's a lot of dialogue choices.
I personally, because this is something I've thought a lot about too, Dazzler during the Krakoa era, and I was like, because I like to think, since I write plays and whatnot, I like to think, okay, if they gave me, some X-Men characters to work with, like sort of what would I craft, like what would kind of be like a team I'd want to work on. And I have not fleshed it out at all really, but I was like, it'd be so cool, because I think something that has been only briefly explored on Krakoa, and kind of only during the Hellfire Gala maybe, is the art culture on Krakoa. Since we're developing like mutant culture, like I feel like mutant specific art should be something that's a part of that. And I think it'd just be so cool if there was like just a book that focused on just some mutant artists, like characters like Dazzler, maybe like almost like a troupe or something. And, I'm sure like in an editorial sense, they'd want there to be some, displays of, fighting and conflict like that and whatnot. And I was thinking like, maybe they can, maybe they'll be like undercover or something. Maybe they can go places under the gist of being just performers, and they're there to, I don't know, do something for diplomatic relations, as happens sometimes. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not a foreign diplomat.
That's a whole other, why isn't she being utilized? This is perfect. Everything is perfect, and they've given so many examples of, oh, she could work here and she could work there, so why isn't she? And like her in a diplomatic sense, like what they should have been doing with her when she was in S.H.I.E.L.D. instead of what was done. But have her, I think it'd be fun if her tour was also, I'd say my first thought is always to mix it with, are you familiar with the show Alias? The spy show?
No, I'm not, but yeah, like espionage is sort of what I was thinking, get them somewhere, then have them infiltrate if you need that.
Yeah, while she's on tour, she's got all these little odd jobs. And then of course, some are going to be a little bigger than others. I feel like she's been dismissed as the singer first, superhero second. I want to see more superheroing. I don't want her to, quit her music ever. But I also don't want it's an inconvenience. She's trying to do a gig, but a bad guy comes to call. And I want her to take charge of something. Because I don't know if you read her Extreme X-Men run.
I did read like 6 issues of it, and I love the premise already of, having to go kill multiversal variants of Charles Xavier.
Yeah, but I love it because it was just, she fell into the leadership role. And it was just like, nobody declared it. She was just like, oh, I guess I'm running it. Cool. And this goes back to her, quality of being a reluctant superhero. It's like, honey, you're pretty good at it. Stop pretending. Oh, I can't do it. Yeah, you can. You're kind of good at it.
And she seemed to know how powerful she was in that run too. I think in the first issue, I think Cyclops is being a little dismissive of her powers when like he doesn't realize she's right behind him, kind of that classic gag.
Right.
But she kind of just throws it right back at him, because and obviously they need her power there to, activate their multidimensional machine or whatever, comic book plot device it was talking about there. But basically the main takeaway was that Dazzler, her power packs a punch. And
and I would love for them to lean into the fact that she's been so underrated, like address it on the page, address it to where, and I used to have a little running joke idea that, well, she's doing it on purpose because she doesn't want, to draw attention. That she looks like she's half-assing it, because she doesn't want, the big bads coming after her. Because, she's like, I started my career with Galactus and Enchantress and Doctor Doom. I don't like it. So maybe I just do what I need. I give you what what you need from me, but you don't know what I'm fully capable of. And that's partly her fault.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny too, because now I'm thinking, even as a character, really, you're right, she's so underutilized, and there's a lot of different paths that writers could explore, and there's a lot of awesome creative teams at Marvel, and I'm sure they could come up with even more cool ways to go with her. But she's also just like an energy source. Like, she is such a powerful energy source, and
Yeah.
that hasn't been used at all either. I feel like they need to give her an opportunity to give back to Krakoa or some way, or to be a part of cultivating that culture there, and they just put her in the Green Lagoon singing over and over.
Yes, over and over, and dancing with Nemesis, which what I feel like that was nothing more than just a pity dance. She was like, because she's such a good person. She was like, oh, all right. This guy apparently has, a kindergarten level of emotional wealth. And so I will give him a drink and a dance, and that's it. But those kinds of things like that, and that was another great disappointment, because the writer had discussed how much he liked her, and he discussed a little bit about her character. And I was like, oh, he gets her character. He understands. And then that was all we got. And it was just like, oh, that happened again. Great. That's why I'm optimistic, but cautiously so, for Exterminators.
Well, hopefully, this will be a new era for Dazzler, and she'll get boosted, and she'll get lifted, and she will become a prominent member of the community on Krakoa, and we'll start seeing her a lot more often.
Yes.
But as for right now, do you have any recommendations for somebody who might be interested in learning more about Dazzler and getting to know the character better?
Oh, geez. I think, like I said to you, her Extreme run is solid. As far as, what we've gotten with modern Dazzler. The Jim McCann one-shot from 2010, it followed the Necrotia storyline with the X-Men, but it was, it was in one issue, it just showed somebody who fundamentally understood the character. And of course, her OG run, I know it can kind of be a slog, but it's, just for the what the F is even happening factor. What is her life?
I definitely agree. That series is really awesome. And so thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate you coming on today to talk Dazzler with me.
Thanks for having me. It was fun. Yeah, I could talk about her all day. So thanks a lot.
And if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening and watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And let me know who your favorite X-Men is, or who you're looking forward to hearing about on this podcast.